Welcome to part 4 of the Live2D PNGTuber rigging tutorial. Today we're going to be going over our exporting process as well as our VtubeStudio setup. Let's go ahead and get started. We're going to have to export two things, and that's going to be our model as well as our idle animation. But before we get to the exporting part, we do have two things to review. The first thing is very simple. It's going to be to just check your voice volume threshold. If you remember, when we rigged this, we set it up so that it changes to the voice volume on setting at the 0.5 input mark. And this can always be adjusted in VtubeStudio, so it's not a huge deal. But if you wanted this to be very plug and play and ready to go when you put it into VtubeStudio, you can always change the exact threshold at which you want this to switch over to by right-clicking on your keyform, then hitting select to select all of your items that are rigged on this parameter. And once you have them all selected, you can right-click and hit adjust, and then you can change these to whatever you want. So if you wanted this to go off when there is any volume at all, for example, you could change this to 0.01 and then 0.02 so that it will flip very close to 0. And that's really all you have to do. I'm going to leave it at 0.5 so I have more room to adjust this later in VtubeStudio, but the fact that we rigged this at all on a very close switch will help us with the parameter adjustment later in VtubeStudio anyway. The next thing that we have to do before export is to make our texture atlas. To open your texture atlas, you'll normally press Ctrl-T, and I have already started working on mine, but in your case, you will get a pop-up that will ask you for what dimensions you would like to make your texture atlas. In our situation, I have mine set to 2048 by 2048, and this has a substantial amount of space to fit all of our items in with no issues. You can also use a 1024 by 1024. The smaller texture atlas that you go with will allow for a smoother model runtime. Once you hit OK, it should give you the same screen that I'm looking at right now, although you might not have anything on your texture atlas quite yet. So I'm going to show you how to add textures in. One option is to left click, hold shift, and select all of your textures, then right click and hit Place Selected Objects to Texture Atlas. They all stack up on top of each other, in which case you can hit the Automatic Layout button up here in the top right, and it will allow you to change the margin for the objects and adjust your scaling settings. I highly recommend checking the Specify User 100% option because this will prevent the resizing of any of your textures, which can cause blurriness once exported. Then go ahead and hit OK, and it should automatically place everything where it needs to go. Just for your own knowledge in the future, it is highly recommended that you hand place objects in your texture atlas, so you can actually grab them and set them as close as possible to each other. If you're going to be working on a large model like mine, it's very good to get into the practice of hand placing objects in your texture atlas because it will allow you to squeeze more things per texture. The more texture sheets that you have, the less optimized your model becomes, and so it is a good practice to keep everything as condensed as you can possibly get it. But in our case, since this is again only a 2048 by 2048 texture atlas, it's likely that your PC will be able to handle this with ease. It is very important that you prevent the textures from overlapping on one another. If there is any overlap, it will cause exporting problems where textures might continue onto other parts of your model's texture, and it will give very strange results. So just make sure that all of your textures are not overlapping from one another, and make sure that they do not go outside of the box of containment while you're working on them. Once you're ready to go, just hit the OK button and it will give you a loading bar and generate the texture atlas. And now you're good for export. Let's press Ctrl-S to save, then go to File, Export for Runtime, Export as Mach 3 file. Your settings should be set to default, so this should be good to go, but feel free to copy my settings and hit the OK button. Then it will prompt you where you would like to save your model, so go ahead and right-click and let's make a new folder. I would highly recommend naming both the folder and the model something that is easy to remember. I'm going to name mine Live2D PNGTuber. Final, make sure to go inside of that folder and change the name of the actual model runtime file as well. Then hit OK, and it should start the exporting process. Once the export is complete, you should get a pop-up in your File Explorer that shows you the exact location of your model and the fully completed export. You should have a physics JSON file, a model JSON file, and a CDI3 JSON file, as well as the actual model runtime and your texture folder, which contains a PNG which has your texture atlas in it. I'll leave a link in the description to the VtubeStudio documentation which explains what each of these files does in terms of your model. Before we continue on though, we need to export our idle animation as well, so let's go to our idle animation and go to File, Export for Runtime, export motion file, leave the settings as default, and hit OK. Make sure that you're saving to the same folder as before, and hit open, and it should export your idle animation into the same folder where your model is located. Now let's hit Ctrl S again to make sure everything is saved and ready to go, and we can close out Live2D. My f***ing background, bro, my wallpaper engine's f***ing broken. That's the f***ing cat. Okay. Now, to get this model functional within VtubeStudio, we do have to put the actual model folder within our Live2D models folder. This is most likely the location of your VtubeStudio models folder. I will leave this file address in the description as well, but this is where you will need to place your model folder. You have to take the actual entire model folder and drag it into Live2D. Grab our entire folder and drag it over and copy to Live2D models. I highly recommend copying it and not moving it, because then if the setup fails for whatever reason, you have a spare copy of an unedited version. Once you move the file folder over, we can go on into VtubeStudio and start working on our setup. So to bring up the main menu, just double click on your screen and go to the little person icon in the top left to change VtubeStudio model. Left click once and it will pull up a list of all of your models that are in your Live2D models folder. I have a ton because I export a ton of bullshit. Now that we know what our model is named, let's pull it up. And mine is Live2D PNGTuber final, so I'm going to click on that one and load it up. When you load the model in, it will ask you if you want to do auto setup or not. In our case, auto setup won't help very much because this model only has a few parameters that are actually tracked, and they're not really standard parameters anyway, so we can just hit cancel and it won't generate any parameter setup for us at all. Before we start working on the parameter setup, let's go to the cog menu and scroll down until you get to the microphone settings section. I moved over to the left side so you can see the settings menu more easily. We're going to toggle on our use microphone option and then make sure that your microphone is set to whatever input you would like it to be set to. In my case, it's my wavelength microphone FX. I leave my gain up all the way so that anytime that I have vocal information, it is boosted a little bit to make it better registered as far as the tracking goes. Your volume cutoff is going to act kind of like a noise gate. If you have some type of FX like using Wavelink, or if you use something like Voice Meter with Cantabile, you might already have a noise gate on your mic, but in the case that you have any sort of background noise, you can add a volume cutoff just to prevent some of that background noise from getting into your mic. In my case, it doesn't really matter. And lastly, the frequency gain will increase the frequency value for your voice. I keep mine around the 69 to 75 mark, but feel free to mess with your settings after we start getting things set up. You can leave the lip sync type as simple lip sync and move on to our parameter setup. Parameter setup is going to be within the settings menu up here at the person with a cog menu. And let's first add in our idle animation by clicking the idle animation button here and selecting our idle animation for our idle animation. Once we do that, we will have our idle animation running in the background. None of it is visible at the moment because we don't have any of our expressions toggled on, but we will be using this in a few moments when we do some hotkey setup. For now, let's scroll down a little bit and add our first parameter, which is going to be voice volume. Input will be voice volume, and output will also be voice volume. And the model will start flashing quite quickly, which we obviously don't want. So there's some settings that we'll have to take care of. Now, just like with last time, I am going to adjust my top threshold to be 0.01. And what this does is it changes the input maximum such that if there's any vocal information at all whatsoever, any volume of any amount, even very quiet, even if I was talking like this, it would automatically translate to the absolute maximum value, an input of 1. And that allows the switch to the voice volume visibility to be quite quick. We made the switch occur in between 0.49 and 0.45, and that allows us to change kind of the way that this eases into things. So if we change our lower value on the output into 0.49, you would see there's a little bit of a phase back out, and you can see the crossover, which I don't really like too much. When I go quiet like this, you can see that opacity fade. So maybe we want to do something like 0.48 instead, and that will let it ease in a little bit better, maybe 0.485. And there's a tiny little fade in animation. So play around with this and see how you like it. You can also keep it at 0 if you don't even want to see the switch or fade out at all. But I do like just a tiny bit of fade, so I'm going to leave mine at 0.485. And now let's add our voice frequency. So add another parameter. Let's rename this to voice frequency. For the input, let's make it voice frequency, and the output also voice frequency. And now we can see our mouth moving and changing depending on the actual frequency that our voice is giving off. For frequency, you shouldn't have to make too many adjustments in terms of the input and output, but in terms of smoothing, you can turn the smoothing up if you want things to move a little bit slower, or you could put it to no smoothing at all, and the shape of your mouth will move very frequently depending on how fast you're changing vowels. I'm going to make some more adjustments here. The last thing that we can do is, if your bouncing is still looking a little bit too intense, you can scroll up here to your physics strength settings, and instead of adjusting all of your physics settings at once, you can hit this small cog up here, and that will allow you to change the intensity of individual physics settings. So in our case, the voice volume bounce might be the thing that's going a little bit too crazy, and so you can adjust that down and make it less intense if that's what you need. I think mine's pretty okay where it is though, so I'm just going to leave it at 1 and hit OK. Now let's add our eye blink parameters in. For our input, eye open left, and for our output, IL open, and we'll set this to auto blinking. And our eye will start automatically blinking. It doesn't need tracking, it will just do it automatically for us. Now let's add our right eye as well. And add auto blinking for this one as well. And now our model has a functional mouth rig as well as automatic blinking. And those are all of the parameters that we'll be needing for the tracking inputs. So let's go ahead and make some expressions. Let's go to the hotkey settings and expressions menu and click expression editor and then create new expression. This is where the parameter organization comes in handy. There are no actual folders showing up here, and so it's nice to have these dummy variables that contain nothing and do nothing, but will help you find all of your parameters as you're scrolling through. You can also search for them down here in the bottom right as well. Let's start with our angry expression. Turn on the angry expression and set it to 1. And if your idle animation is set up properly, the animation for the angry pulse should be showing now. Let's name this expression angry and hit save. And now let's do the same for the rest of our expressions. Okay, and now that we have all of our expression files ready to go, we can hit this Create New Hotkeys for All Unused Expressions button, and it will generate hotkeys for all of the expressions that you've made that do not have hotkeys set up. Then you can hit OK, and it will generate all of those hotkeys for you. Now that these hotkeys are set up, you can bind them to any key of your choice. So for example, let's set one to 8, and when we hit the button 8, it will toggle on our angry expression. You can adjust some settings down here, so for example, you can have it automatically stop after a period of time, and you can also change the fade period. So if you don't like the fade in, you can change this to a very low period of time, and when you press the hotkey, there will be no fade in. And now that you have your hotkeys set up, you can also add in the option for them to activate with Twitch events. To do that, you have to go to your main cog menu and scroll down into your Twitch settings section. It should be towards the bottom. You'll hit connect account, and it will load a browser window where you can select authorize and connect your account. You can then toggle the login and activate button on and select config and go to your Twitch hotkey triggers and make sure that the Twitch hotkey triggers option is turned on. Once you're done with that, you can go back to your hotkeys and select the Twitch icon up here, and it should give you some options as well. Then you can go back to your expressions menu and select whichever hotkey you would like to use for your Twitch trigger. In this case, I'm going to do it for bald. Select the Twitch icon and it will give you some options here to set up. And you can set it to trigger with whatever Twitch event you would like. So for example, for a subscriber to occur, you can hit toggle on and hit OK. And then this will trigger any time that you get a sub. And now your PNGTuber is completely set up and your hotkeys are ready to go. The last thing to do is to make sure that you're able to capture it in OBS. And to do that, I highly recommend using the plugin Spout2. I have a video on installing and using Spout2 for your OBS capture. I'll leave a link in the description for setting that up. Good work, you now have a functional Live2D PNGTuber that is able to run in VtubeStudio and take advantage of all of VtubeStudio's unique assets like special effects, recolors, API access for apps like Twitch integrated throwing system, and even regular collabs through VNet as well as Fujitech collabs. I hope you found this tutorial helpful, and if you did, make sure to drop a like and subscribe to this channel as well as my main channel if you want some more fun stuff and less tutorial stuff. Let me know if there's any other tutorials that you'd like to see in the future, and until then, see ya!